Well, that was big. That's why. Is that okay?
I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. Roll call.
Councilmember Sekiewicz. Here. Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Wiggins.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Pokencourt. And Mayor Davies.
Here.
Everyone is present. Thank you.
All right, you can stand for the pledge, please. Would you Sure.
Salute, pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Audience communications, the council cannot comment on items not listed on special council meeting agenda. Comments directed to an agenda on the, an item on the agenda should be made at the time the item is called for discussion. Business, we'll turn it over to Mr. Garrett. City manager reports.
Thank you, Mayor Davies. I have a few words, an opening statement, if you will. As CEO, the city manager of a public corporation, I'm extremely proud of this year's budget. The city of Tehachapi will be presenting the following budget, representing $42 million in anticipated revenues across our many departments in 2023-24. This is a $42 million corporation that our staff runs much like a private entity with the eye to efficiency and results for our stakeholders, you the residents. Investing in people. Labor continues to be a topic across the nation, with hiring and job openings continuing to be a challenge for many corporations. At the City of Tehachapi, while we've had challenges filling some positions, for most of the part, there are plenty of applicants interested in working for the city because we invest in people. These people investment deliver results and make the city what it is, a shining example in Kern County and statewide. The cost of doing business. As many businesses are aware, employee costs have increased over the last few years. This includes insurance premiums and cost of living, which is not a raise sometimes characterized, but the cost of keeping up with expenses. The budget reflects that, which in turn reflects why we have such an amazing team across a multitude of departments that are delivering public and private projects and setting trends in local government that are being emulated by cities many times our size. We should invest in that without hesitation. Of those employee expenses, 50% of those are related to public safety and Tehachapi Police Department. Measure S. Last year, city residents overwhelmingly passed Measure S, a 1-cent sales tax increase to fund several essential services, including law enforcement, fire, and infrastructure maintenance. A few months ago, the council was made aware of a potential ballot initiative in 2024, which, if passed, could challenge some of the city of Tehachapi's fee revenue. In addition, potentially Measure S, since it was passed without a firm sunset date. Upon learning of this, we had announced that we would not be spending Measure S funds in this upcoming budget as a precaution in case that ballot initiative was passed and Measure S was challenged. We've had some correspondence with the initiative organizer along with our Measure S consultant, and we feel confident that our language, which included "until ended by voters," was in fact a sunset clause on that revenue. More importantly, as a staff, we felt that we had a duty to allocate these funds as the residents in the city desired us to do when they voted to approve Measure S last November, and not allowed to be held hostage by special interest groups. As promised, this budget shows direct allocations for Measure S funds, all of which are aimed at paying our fire department contract, paying our police officers, dispatchers, public safety, and public works personnel, and maintaining our infrastructure. As requested by voters, we will be using these funds to continue to deliver services with a winning team. Those expenses related to Measure S are clearly on display with this budget. Challenges. We continue to live in uncertain economic times, both globally and nationally, and those decisions do have a trickle-down effect on our business here in the city of Tehachapi. To combat those challenges, we are prepared for what's next. We have built strong, healthy reserves. Quite frankly, amazing reserves. These funds allow us to deal with infrastructure emergencies on a national, state, or even local crisis. They also allow us to adjust our deliverables for city residents without putting the city into debt. These reserves indicate that we are ready for anything. There are plans for those reserves, especially within the world of infrastructure, and over the next 5 years, we will continue to invest heavily in our infrastructure with those reserve funds while also maintaining a healthy, responsible balance. I am pleased of the efforts of the entire staff of this budget. It is an indication of not only the talent level we have on staff and their dedication to our city, but our ability to budget conservatively and provide great services to our residents here in this great city of Tehachapi. I'm going to now turn it over to our Chief Financial Officer, Ahmed Jones, for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So we started this budget process back in January. Finance sent out forms to our departments, and departments were tasked with completing their expenditure budgets. And so from there, we worked on our mid-year budget. We completed that in March. We then worked to finalize the numbers. We held department head meetings in May to go over the department's budgets. And then finance worked on putting together this presentation and putting together our budget. So here we are for adoption June 26th. So we'll start citywide. So this is all funds that we're doing here. And so we're going to start with kind of looking overall at the big expenditures and factors facing the budget. So this is a slide that we had in last year's budget, and just to reiterate, one of the biggest factors affecting the budget, and mainly the general fund, is the city's fire contract. So you can see there the top line there, total contract costs. In 21-22, the total contract cost was just over $700,000, and by the end in 27-28, we're at $2.2 million. So that's funded by the next row there of what we call the allocated property tax. That's the property tax revenue paid by the residents that goes towards paying the contract. And then the difference is what the general fund has to pay, and that's what we're referring there to the extra payment to the county. So you can see it was just $18,000 in 21-22, and then significantly increases by 27-28 to $1.27 million. And that's a direct hit to the general fund.
Do we get the opportunity to ask questions through this, or are you presenting and then we ask questions?
What we'd like to do is finish each fund, because the next slide may answer your question, but if not, we can stop as we go, whatever the pleasure of the council is, but the next slide may answer your question.
I'll wait.
Okay, you want to wait? Thank you.
Some of the other factors affecting the overall budget is we continue to have some subsidies that the general fund has to provide for other funds. So starting with the airport operations, you can see it ranges from about $155,000 in 23-24 all the way up to a little over $200,000 in 27-28. And that's just because the airport's revenues aren't enough to cover all of its operating expenditures. Airport projects, those are basically general fund grant matches. So there are some large capital projects in the general fund over the next 5 years, and so the general fund is providing a 5.5% match. And then you have the landscape and lighting districts, and so those are for the various developments throughout the city. Again, the expenses there have outgrown or outpaced the revenues, and so the general fund has to kick in so that we can maintain those landscape districts. So altogether there, you have a range of about 670,000 in 24-25, up to 1.1 million in 26-27 that the general fund is kicking in to support these funds.
The question is, why do we see such a drop in the 24-25 budget as opposed to a plus 13, and each of the rest of them that go across are a drop? What happened?
It is because of the airport grant, the matching component. So in an upcoming meeting, we'll be presenting to you, as we've discussed, a very large FAA grant, $7.5 million, I'm rounding, and we're required to match those funds. So that number goes up for that year, but then it comes back down to the normal operating deficits.
Okay, we'll go back to the page before that.
And then the percentage map is...
Correct.
The percentages go
say
down,
what-
yeah. If we're looking at such an incline of over $2 million just for paying for our fire, are we looking at our own fire department? Is that an option? What's the difference of paying for Kern County, which we can't control, to a fire department of our own that we could control?
Great question, and the answer is yes. We're looking at all options. We were blindsided, quite frankly, 2 years ago by the County of Kern with this rate increase. Since then, we have been talking to fire professionals. We've visited other cities and their management. The public safety conversations will never go away. Several years ago, 10 plus years ago, we went, Councilmember Smith, you remember, we went from Kern County Sheriff to Tehachapi Police Department for good reason. Never looking back, actually. Will we start our own fire department? We don't know yet, but $2 million is a lot of money for an organization that doesn't necessarily work for us or answer to us. Public safety is the number one item on our list that matters the most. So we're looking at all options at this point.
I think we really should be looking into our own fire department. As I said before, we can control that. We can control the units that they send and not double send. And as we've talked, why do we send 5 or 6 pieces when we could send 1 or 2?
Or when there's a fire in the city, and there's no fire apparatus to assist us.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
So another expenditure that is really affecting citywide all funds is our insurance premiums. And so, the city has to hold workers' comp insurance for its employees. We have health insurance, obviously we have to provide. And then under that all other insurances row there, that's the city's liability insurance, property insurance, vehicles, cyber, etc. And this industry is seeing increases, across the board. So, in the workers' comp row there, we're seeing an 8% increase. In the all other insurances, the average increase is about 17% for next year. And then our health insurance, we're projecting about a 15% increase. So the city's been fortunate over the last few years where its health insurance has not risen significantly. We've even had a few years with declining premiums, but we're not seeing that in 23-24. So again, overall, with all of that, we're seeing a 13% increase in 23-24. So increases to all funds. This slide is highlighting kind of the major capital project expenses. And so we've got a lot going on here. So the biggest one, that airport taxiway relocation drainage improvement project of $6.8 million. Again, that 90% of that is funded by an FAA grant. Another 4.5% comes from the state, and then the other 5.5% comes from the general fund as a match. We have the Denison Bicycle and Pedestrian Improvement Project, over $2 million. Again, that's funded completely by federal grants, other grants, and streets and roads funding. We have the Valley Boulevard Park project, 1.9 million next year. We had some engineering fees budgeted in the current year, so overall that project's over $2 million, and that's completely funded by a state grant. We have some grind overlays at EF and Poly, $576,000. That's completely funded by streets and roads funding and gas tax funding. The Valley Boulevard street rehab, that's from Beach to Curry. Again, that's a federal grant and also supplemented by SB1 funds and streets and roads funding. And then we have the Tehachapi Boulevard bike lane fence. That's funded by some leftover redevelopment funds and also supplemented by some traffic fees.
Good question. This $6.8 million for the taxiway. Is that shown as an expenditure for us?
Yes.
And if we're going to receive grants and such as that, why did that show as an expenditure in there? If we're getting reimbursed, do I not understand the
Yeah,
procedure?
Well, so the proper accounting, you do have to show the full expenditures, and then you have to do matching of the revenues with the expenditures. So we have to show both sides.
So as,
Credits and debits.
so as Councilmember Sakowitz will recall, if we didn't have healthy budget, healthy reserves, we couldn't really pull these projects off. So it's our cash that pays the contractors. And then we submit for reimbursement. And then we're reimbursed periodically throughout the contract. So it could take a year before we are reimbursed. So we show it in the budget because it is an expense, but we are reimbursed for that expense. And then we also show the matching components, whether it's the state of California, which is Caltrans Aeronautics in this case, or the city of Tehachapi's general fund. So we have to show an in and an out.
And where does that show up when we receive that?
Well, it's on our books when we receive it. We receive a wire transfer and the money then is credited to that account.
So we'll show back up.
Some of the other major expenses that are not capital projects, we are highlighting we have budget for a couple police department vehicles and some other equipment needed. In public works, we have the irrigation controller upgrade, as well as a lot of repairs to city buildings and maintenance. We're replacing the air conditioning units at a couple buildings, as well as the roof at City Hall. We have some IT security upgrades. A lot of that is for an access control project, and then we're doing some upgrades to our UPS devices. Those first four are all general fund items. The Denison well maintenance for $100,000, that's out of our water fund. And then sewer fund has quite a bit of capital expenditures. So you have a new reclamation area budgeted at $400,000. The headwork screw and bypass replacements for $150,000, another $150,000 for a clarifier overhaul, and then a SCADA system upgrade for wastewater. So now we'll go into some of the numbers. Again, citywide, this is for all funds, so the overall revenue budget is just under $42 million. That's led by general fund at $15.5 million. And then the airport fund at just over $8 million. And again, airport traditionally does not have that much revenues. 6.5 of that $8 million is from grant funding and the city's match. After that, again, capital projects, a lot of grant funding there. So $7.2 million in revenues to reimburse all those capital projects. And then you can go down the list for the various enterprise funds and all the way down to transit. This is that same number, but shown in a pie chart, just so you can get a sense. General fund is at 37% of the total revenue budget at $15.5 million. Airport at 19%, and then the capital projects at 18%. So those three pieces of the pie make up 74% of the total revenue. Right now we'll dive into the expenditure side. Again, all funds citywide. $39.7 million, led by the general fund at $13.5 million, and then the airport again at $8 million. largely made up of the airport taxiway relocation and drainage project. Again, capital projects, just under $7 million, and then you have your various enterprise funds and special funds. Same number, but in the pie chart again. General fund is just over a third at 34% of the expenditure budget. Airport 20%, capital project 17%. So again, those three biggest pieces of the pie make up 71% of the overall citywide expenditure budget. Again, further breaking down that $39.7 million in expenditures, but this is in the categories. So we're showing the personnel costs overall at 29% of the budget, operating expenses at 33%, and then capital outlay at 38%. So again, we're just highlighting that in this budget for 23-24, the city's spending more in capital than its other categories of personnel and operating. All right, now we're going to head into general fund. So general fund revenue, again, just under $15.5 million. The largest component of that you'll see is the blue piece of the pie. That's sales tax at $8 million, or 52%. Traditionally, our sales tax has been about $4 million, but now we've added on the district transaction tax, the extra 1%. So we're projecting about $8 million between the original Bradley Burns 1% and the new 1%. So that makes up over half of the general fund revenues. This slide shows the top 10 sources of the general fund revenue. So again, sales tax makes up the biggest piece, followed by the vehicle license fees of $1.7 million, then property taxes at $1.6, and development services revenue at $1.2 million. The transient occupancy tax, that's our TOT or hotel tax, that's at $898,000, and then all the way down fills out the remaining top 10 revenue sources.
Let's point out interest income, $400,000, thanks to Ahmed, working with on our policies and procedures, and interest rates being higher, of course, but we've received over $400K in interest income. That's obviously helped our bottom line.
What's our transient occupancy tax rate at the moment?
8%.
8. It's about half of most places.
Half or a third of other cities that have attractions like we do, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And this is just the remaining kind of sources of general fund revenue. So we've got miscellaneous revenue that includes credit card processing fees and other administrative fees, all the way down to just other taxes and revenues. So
$40,000 revenue from passports. I would have never imagined that.
Yeah.
It does, however, cost us a bit of money to
Well,
process $40,000 worth of passports, but certainly City Hall is busy every day. Grace, Jessica, they process, how many passports did we process last year? Roughly
Last year?
hundreds.
Yeah, we typically do around 400 or so.
400 passports. And those fees are set by the State Department.
Right.
this slide is a comparison. So we're taking what we're projecting for 23-24 and we're comparing it to what we estimated in our current fiscal year, 22-23. So we're looking at any variances. So you'll see for the sales tax, although we were estimating it's $4 million in new sales tax money, it was effective April 1st. And so we had estimated about $700,000 for the 1 quarter in the current fiscal year. So when you compare the $4 million to that, it's a little over $3 million variance. Development services revenue, we do show a decline of $78,000. Again, we're just being conservative. We had I think some higher permitting revenue in the current year, and so we're back to just using our conservative numbers going forward. Interest income, $125,000. As Greg said, that's a function of higher interest rates and also just I think more active investing of our pulled cash within our investment policy. We opened up a different investment vehicle. Traditionally, the city has used LAIF. It's a state fund. We have now invested our idle cash with CAMP, and their interest rates are significantly higher, so we've been able to capture a lot of additional revenue there.
What does that stand for?
California Asset Management Program.
Okay.
So very similar to LAIF, very safe, liquid accounts. If we need money same day, if I do it by 11 o'clock, I can get it by the afternoon. So we're always assessing our liquidity, making sure we have enough on hand to pay our bills. And also, I just want to point out, you'll see the very bottom one there, the police grants and revenue shows a variance, negative 83,000. Again, that's just a function of conservative budgeting. The city typically receives about 160,000 in what we call the COPS grant, but out of that, there's a baseline of 100,000 that the city's guaranteed to get each year. And then there's a growth component above that the city shares in and receives. However, when we talked to Kern County, they recommended just budgeting the 100,000 because there's no guarantee that we will be able to get that growth component each year. So again, in 2023, we knew we were going to get the full amount. We dropped the budget in 23-24 back down, and that's why you see a negative variance there.
On the development services, is that reflecting just fewer homes under construction at the moment?
Yeah, that and many other factors, patio covers or Walmarts or, just what's happening. We provide lots of services to developers, and they typically will reimburse the city for that, right? It's not taxpayer dollars. So it's the fees that we charge to support those industries. So yes. And, that's, the economy is, how many home permits are pulled, you put in a new water line, all kinds of things. You could never get that one. You could never pick that number and hit it every year.
This is our estimate.
Correct.
Okay.
Conservative estimate.
So this is just a line graph of kind of the major revenues sources again for the general fund. So you'll see the bottom four, that's our vehicle license fee revenue, property taxes, TOT tax, franchise tax, and so on. And so you can see it's just been kind of slow, steady growth there. And then the top line is the sales tax. So you can see going back a few years, we did see some increases kind of coming out of COVID, and higher gas prices led to higher sales tax for the city. And then you see the big jump going from 22-23 there to 23-24, and that's the new 1% transactions tax. Thereafter, you'll see again, just kind of we're projecting just slow, steady growth, maybe just 1% going forward. So now we'll look at each one of those separately. So again, sales tax now, we're projecting $8 million. Of course, that's a big increase from both 22-23 and 21-22 because of the new 1% sales tax. Combined for 5 years, yes, it's an overall growth of 13.9%. That's inflated because of the huge increase going to next year. And then after that, just again, 1% going forward, being very conservative.
Since we're on that, and we've talked a minute on it, you mentioned in your opening, Greg, that the folks that are trying to reverse the taxpayers' wishes, you stated that we feel that our sunset clause is the statement in there that until rescinded by the taxpayers. And was that a legal opinion?
Yes. Yeah, so we are working with the California League of Cities, our consultant and others, and all points point to the fact that that single clause will keep us in the black and will not challenge. Now, anything could be challenged, for sure. But at this point, we feel confident enough that we could include those dollars in this budget.
All right,
Yes.
and going forward?
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
The thing that really worries me, Councilmember Smith, is the fee component. So remember, there are two components to this initiative. One was the sales tax. You didn't have a sunset clause or until sunsetted by voters. And the other component was the fees that are charged to, let's say, developers when you want to build a new home in your neighborhood, or a Walmart, or an Albertsons. They don't want to pay fees anymore to connect to the water system, to the sewer system. That's problematic, because what they're saying is, you, taxpayer of the city of Tehachapi, you're going to pay their way. Those fees are connection fees, right? It costs money to provide the infrastructure and that fresh water and that wastewater service and so on and so forth. That's what really concerns us. We've shifted our focus away from sales tax to development fees. It's a big concern of the city of Tehachapi and all of the cities up and down the state. If that happens, we're going to have to make a choice. Either city taxpayers subsidize the development, or we tell the development, sorry.
That's what I would do.
We don't have the capacity. I would recommend that we lean towards the latter.
Sure.
Yeah.
Why would
If you want to come in, you need to
subsidize?
pay like you have throughout the
It
centuries.
doesn't make any sense.
Well, homeowner pays for hookup, what's the difference?
There is no difference. When you build, you should pay. You should pay your own way.
Okay.
I'm oversimplifying it.
But still, we would
That's
have,
the gist of it.
yeah, our recourse would be, well, we can't afford it because you're not paying for the future growth of the sewer plant.
Or we have to spend taxpayer dollars potentially hiring highly paid consultants and spending hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on studies to prove, and we already do this, we do this now, but to prove without, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that those monies will be spent on, the connections. And they are, of course. We show that every day. That's what happens. But they're requiring us to potentially move forward with even more bureaucracy.
Is that still included in their,
Yes. They're moving forward with this. And again, it's the Albertsons, it's the Chevrons, they want to build new gas stations and new grocery stores, but they don't want to pay for it. They don't want to pay for the connections.
and it's not just connections, it's everything associated with building
Could be, absolutely.
or development services fees?
Yeah.
Okay.
Next is...
So, that $4 or $5 million delta that we're seeing now, is that what it is, about 5 now, per year?
For sales tax,
Yes, for sales tax?
a little over 4 million.
Okay, what are we talking about for those other fees? What's that amount? Not, I know the delta in the sales tax, we can define that, 1%, but what's our total
But I don't
fees
think
as
we-
part of our revenue
I don't think we
structure?
understand, it could be infinite because of the costs moving forward. You can't just allow people to connect to your wastewater treatment plant without paying, to assist in paying for not the operations, but the upgrades necessary. So if you connect another Walmart or another 100 homes, there's a cost to that, and so somebody's going to have to pay to increase the capacity at the wastewater treatment plant. So the sky's the limit. And until we know more about this, and it'll be in a future budget, that's for sure, 2 or 3 years out. But certainly that's the most worrisome for us at this point.
Well, that would kill cities.
It would kill cities. It would bankrupt cities.
I can see some
think-
boycotts coming.
Oh, I think, well, I don't think the voter education is super important. They like to use catchy phrases, voter initiative, all those different things that trick voters into voting for something. If this passes, the general taxpayer will be subsidizing corporations.
so it just doesn't sound right whatsoever.
Well, we're working with our partners at the League of California Cities, CalEd, and other organizations, and our sales tax consultant. We're monitoring this, but they've kind of gone dark at this point.
It doesn't seem to be too much floating out there.
And it behooves them to go dark. Why would they want people to start talking about this, right? One of the reasons why we started our campaign several months ago was to educate the public. We need people to know what's really going on here.
And who's behind it?
And who's behind it.
Yeah.
It's press releases, we released a list of organizations or companies, corporations. So we have our finger on the pulse still, but they've gone dark.
And it's not just this city that believes that it could affect taxpayers that much.
All of my colleagues
It's all of them.
have the
Yes.
same concern.
Yeah, not just Tehachapi.
It's on our regular agenda that we discuss and share information.
Interesting.
So the next revenue to look at the graph is property tax revenue, so just under 2.4 million. We continue to see kind of slow, steady growth there. 3% increase for next year is what we're projecting, and over 5 years, an average 3.4% increase. Our TOT tax, the hotel tax, just under 900,000. You can see in the graph, there was quite a spike going from 1920 to 21-22. Again, this is probably from kind of the COVID rebound. People are traveling more, maybe some local projects here, filling up the hotels. But when we look at the current fiscal year, 22-23, you can see that dip. We're seeing right now about a 14% decrease. That could be from higher gas prices, inflation kicking in, maybe fewer construction projects locally. So it's something that we're monitoring. We've brought down our revenue budget back down, and then we're just projecting to just a slow 1% growth going forward.
But it did not dip below the 2021 dot on the graph.
Correct.
So if you draw a line from there to there, it's still a standard trend. So, okay.
Vehicle license fees.
She has a question.
I'm sorry, I just had a question. So I'm noticing lots more Airbnbs and VRBOs. Are those cutting into hotels and motels? And do you get a piece of that action?
So there's only about 4 or 5 in the city, is that right?
Might be closer to 7 to 10 now.
7 to 10, so it's growing quite a bit. And so the answer is yes, we do receive that.
You get a piece of their action too?
Yes, they do have to file they file quarterly their TOT returns, and so we are seeing some revenue from that.
Thanks.
This is a tough one. We actually have two more hotels, I don't want to say in the queue, but certainly in the planning stages. We talked to hotel developers, and they do their homework. They don't build multi-million-dollar hotels without the knowledge of, heads and beds, if you will, as they put it. And so I think the more hotel room, Tehachapi is a destination. We're top of the hill. It's a little cooler here between the railroads, LAC, Department of Water and Power, Caltrans, the renewables, and tourists. Our TOT, our hotel occupancy is quite high, the percentage, actually, and people will drive an hour from here to wherever they're working if they're in that category. So we feel very confident about our hotels and the TOT revenue that the bringing in.
Right, next is our vehicle license fee, 1.7 million. This is basically what the state remits to the city in the form of property tax. Each year, this goes up or down by the city's growth in its assessed value. So our overall property values within the city, whatever percentage that goes up, this revenue source would go up by the same. So we've seen some pretty good growth here, but going forward, we're just budgeting conservatively. We're just showing it at a 2% annual growth.
So Mr. Smith, I could see you looking.
Well, you're talking about vehicle license fees, and it's tied to our property tax.
Yes, so what happened many years ago, the city of
The triple
Tehachapi-
flip and everything else.
Well, that happened and a couple other things, but the city of Tehachapi annexed CCI into our city limits because vehicle license fee, which is your DMV tax, at that time was associated with vehicles. How much you paid for your tags, what you owned. Did you own a Toyota Corolla or a Maserati? You paid appropriately, right? And then we would get a piece of that action. The state changed that, so it's not associated with vehicles any longer. As Samantha just pointed out, it's associated with property values. So they really should rename this at the state level because it has nothing to do with vehicles any longer, even though they do collect those large vehicle license tag fees. It's associated now with property tax. That change was made several years ago, a couple years ago.
They've been shuffling these shells for a few years now.
Yeah.
So maybe we should de-annex CCI.
They don't know.
Not anymore.
Costs us money. And it's not under a property tax, state owned.
Interesting. Okay.
Another thing to look at.
However, we do get the, when you're going for funding or your allocations based on population.
Sometimes it's few and far between these days, but I say that, I don't really mean it. CCI is a great part of our economy.
Yeah.
That's for sure. I am worried, however, the state of California, this is going outside of our budget, but it certainly should be discussed. We need to be aware of it. The state is looking to close 5 additional prisons in addition to the ones they've already named. They closed 2 yards at CCI, they're closing California City, Blythe, Susanville. They're looking to close 5 additional prisons. We need to be ready for that. And we've started some discussions with others about that.
All right, now we'll dive into the expenditure side for the general fund. So 13.4 million. Of that, personnel is about 56% of general fund expenditures, and we further broke that down into PD, or police department personnel, at 34%, and non-PD at 22%. And then we still have operating expenditures at 38%. Another pie chart breaking out that 13.4 million by department. So you can see here that the police department at 5.5 million is at 41% of the general fund budget, and then the fire contract just to the left there in red is at 9%. So together, fire and police is at 50% of the general fund budget.
It's a good thing our general fund is very healthy.
Yes, it is healthy.
To some cities, those two elements are much higher than 50% of their general fund.
50% is typically the threshold.
Yeah.
That's where we want to be.
You want to be 50% or less
Yeah.
if you are public safety. That's a general rule.
Yeah.
Some cities spend a lot more for good reason.
Yeah.
Some cities spend a lot less. Some cities don't spend any at all. Maricopa, they're being provided Kern County Sheriff and Kern County Fire.
No charge.
Millions a year, they don't pay a dime.
Yeah.
McFarland, for years, didn't pay fire or police, or maybe it was just sheriff, I'm not sure. But anyway, we pay our bills.
That's a good question on this. If we're looking at buying a couple new vehicles for the police department, are those going to be the new electric? Or are they going to be the gas? Are we going to be able to skip the electric at this point?
It's my understanding that public safety is exempt from that rule. So that's up today. Tomorrow is a different
Tomorrow
day.
it changes.
But right now, public safety apparatus is exempt from the electric vehicle mandates.
But we as a city are not.
we as a city are not. So Don Marsh, our Public Works Department, and others, Don has actually opened a project with Southern California Edison evaluating electric infrastructure and where power stations, charging stations need to be located, would be located. So we'll be working on that with our partners from Southern California Edison, even though those vehicles don't exist yet. But we want to make sure that we're doing our homework and we have knowledge of what's coming around the bend.
So do I understand that the city would be responsible for that cost, or is that something that the power company puts in?
The electric company does not do anything for free, nothing at all. If you want power, you pay for it. If you need to move power, you pay for it. If you need to buy power, you pay for it. So yes, the city would have to pay 100% of that bill, unless there are grants, future grants that come down from Sacramento. But typically, these are all unfunded mandates, like SB 1383, our organics, it's unfunded. Electric vehicles, unfunded. Homelessness, there's a bill moving through the state now where they're going to require cities to manage and pay all the expenses for homeless personnel. 1/3 of all homeless live in the state of California for the entire nation.
I'm selling my house and could only homeless.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So hold on to your seat. We may be required to pay for all homeless activities that may or may not happen in our city, unfunded by Sacramento.
Of course.
And so then we have the same kind of chart here, but fast forward to fiscal year 27-28. So 5 years later, you see the police budget is still at 41% of the overall budget, but fire now has gone from 9% to 14%, and mainly because of the increase in the contract costs. So now you've gone from a combined 50% to 55% of those two.
And that's with our projections to that year for revenues. All right.
Correct. All right, this slide is the overall kind of budget summary for the general fund. So we'll give you a year of actuals, 21-22 to the left, our mid-year projections at 22-23, and then highlighted in yellow there is the 23-24 next year budget. And then beyond that, we go 4 additional preliminary budget years. You can see there that kind of the row across in yellow says surplus deficit. So you see in 23-24, a little over $2 million surplus we're projecting to the general fund, then going up to 2.2 million, down to 1.8 million, and then decreasing all the way down to 500,000. So as the fire contract goes up and some of our other expenditures are going up, that surplus is declining. We do still have that positive surplus, and so a lot of that beyond that is going to depend on what happens with this next fire contract. Do want to point out though the ending fund balance is there, kind of in that blue row. That's our fund balance or our reserves for general fund. So we do have healthy reserves there. We're adding to those reserves, and as Greg said earlier, those can be used for emergencies. They can be used for capital projects, street projects, anything that the city plans for in the future.
So is the blue line what we consider our reserves, or is it at the bottom?
So that blue line is the reserve levels, but then what we've done is we've said, well, what's the actual available cash? Because some of that money is tied up in loans and internal loans. And so that bottom line number is the actual cash that would be available. So at 27-28, although you have an accounting fund balance of 24.5 million, what's really available for cash and to spend would be 19.5 million.
So that's your cash available and your accounts receivable.
Right, so remember, because we do have a healthy budget, we've been able to loan ourselves money. This building, for example, we loaned ourselves money to build this. So development fees, right? We talked about that earlier. Our police department, there's a public safety fee associated with that. That fee did not have enough money in its account to pay for this building, which is $4.5 million, something like that. And so
Otherwise, we'd have to go out and get a bond and pay the interest on that.
Pay somebody, hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe $1 million once you're done with interest and origination fees, those sorts of things, for that $4.5 million. So we loaned ourselves money. So the blue line is the actual hard cash and the balance of the loans that are due to the general fund. The very bottom line is the green hard cash that we have in the bank. So today we have, $14.6 million hard green cash. The projection is in 5 years, 19 and a half. At the end of the day, if you can kind of net the general fund, or all these funds actually, that means you're providing a good service at optimum quality without overcharging. And if you can put a little bit of that away into your savings account, you're doing pretty good. I'm extremely proud that we have, this amount of money for a rainy day, or as Hamed pointed out, if the council decided, if the city decided that it wanted to build a civic center or wanted to, redo 10 more streets, we have the cash to do that. So we're in a really good position.
It's like our own checkbooks at home. We don't necessarily want to spend it all because we have some savings every year.
But we have
Next
a lot
year,
of
there's
things.
stuff else going to be coming.
Well, we steered the city through the recession. We steered this city through COVID. And we've come out both ends of that, and it's been amazing. We're stronger because of it, with personnel, with the greatest people working for the city of Tehachapi that you could ever ask for. And our budget is solid as a rock. So we're in a really good spot, but we'll keep ourselves that way. Be very, very conservative budgeting and very, very conservative spending.
I didn't do the math. What's the percent of total general fund that our cash reserves is? Our cash reserves represent what percent of our general fund?
So
Total?
percentage of like operating expenditures?
Of whatever the total general fund is.
And at the end, say about 150% in 27-28. So if you were to take that 24.5 million.
So what percentage of our general fund is our cash, our cash reserves?
That's
Did you say 150?
150%.
150%.
We have 150% in the bank more than we spend.
Okay,
By the end in 27-28.
right.
So
Okay,
we'll have a year and a half worth of cash in the bank if everything's stopped.
right, okay.
Typically, you have 3 months.
That's a good place to be. I'd rather be here than cities that lay off every time there's a crisis and have to adjust everybody. So this is a good place to be.
So again, we just want to reiterate still some ongoing challenges facing the general fund. So as we talked about, we're seeing these huge fire contract increases over the next 6 years. We continue to have a priority on our public safety. In last year's budget, 22-23, we added several positions to the police department. And so we're trying to recruit to fill any vacancies there. We're trying to retain. And so that's still ongoing and important use of our general fund. Again, insurance premiums every year are going up. We're seeing a 13% increase next year. As Greg just talked about, we continue to see these unfunded mandates from the state. So whether it's SB 1383, these vehicle emission standards, clean vehicles. We recently had a radio encryption upgrade that was required or put onto the police department. So we continue to see those unfunded mandates. We continue to have these needed subsidies to the LLDs, our landscape and lighting districts, and the airport. That's just to support and maintain those districts, the landscaping to maintain airport operations. Deferred maintenance, again, like we budgeted, we have several repairs, building maintenance, coming this year and into the future. And then again, with the economy, there's a continued threat of recession. So inflation still remains high, even though it's come down, it's still higher than what the Feds would like to see. And with that, we could see decreased spending and lower revenues in the future. So all things that we're continuing to track and monitor. And here we wanted to show again and talk about Measure S, so our local control essential services measure. Again, this was to protect our financial stability, maintain fire, 911, public safety, and infrastructure. So we try to identify specifically some positions here that are using this Measure S money. At the top there, again, we're estimating starting with $4 million in additional revenue. The positions that we listed there, those police officer positions, those were some new and added last fiscal year. Those are salaries and benefits and taxes. So you can kind of get a sense of what the costs are there just for those positions. You'll see in the kind of the middle there, the fire contract and that extra payment that has to come from the general fund, all the way up to $1.2 million. And then we have some new public works positions, and those are seasonal workers, maintenance workers, to maintain, repair potholes, maintain sidewalks, maintain the landscaping, maintain our infrastructure. And then we have those LLD subsidies. So for general fund to continue to sustain and provide those subsidies to maintain those areas, those are the dollar amounts that are required.
What do they call it, a district sales tax? Is it like, explain.
They call it a district transactions tax. So, I mean, again, it's within the city district. I'm not sure why they use that terminology.
Who's they?
Well,
General accounting?
California, the CDTFA, Department of Tax and Fee Administration.
Okay.
So it used to be called the State Board of Equalization.
Right.
So the original 1% that makes up, out of the 7.25 that we had, that was called the Bradley Burns tax. And so, the cities get that 1% out of whatever their sales tax rate is. And then this additional 1%, they call it a district transactions add-on tax.
Those are measure taxes, like Measure S. Okay.
Correct.
Just curious. Just all right.
So that's it for general fund. Pause there. Anyone have any questions specifically on general fund?
We'll have to take in a lot of work on this, so I appreciate your doing this and bringing it to our attention.
All right, we'll dive in now to the enterprise funds and capital project funds, kind of the remaining fund structure for the city. The first enterprise fund is the water fund, and so our water sales revenue, we're projecting at $2.7 million. That's an increase of about 6.9% from what we estimated for 22-23. That number, or the rates, our water rates, we increase by a CPI adjustment each year. So we look to our January CPI year over year, and we adjust those rates. The water connection fee revenue, we're showing, as well as the water entitlement fees. So these are the connection fees that we were talking about earlier. We're basing them, we're being conservative, we're basing those on 30 units, and so that's just on future development going forward.
Consumer price index.
Overall, the water fund revenue is just over $3 million, and again, you can see that the water rate, kind of utility revenue, makes up 92% of that. You have a little bit of interest income, connection fees, water rate mitigation fees, and then other miscellaneous fees. Here we give you kind of a 10-year trend to see what that water rate revenue looks like. And again, this is increased each year by a CPI adjustment. You'll notice between 21-22 and the mid 22-23, it's pretty flat. So even though we had a pretty large CPI adjustment to that, our water revenue was pretty flat, mainly because of we had such a wet winter. So there was a lot less water usage, less revenue then coming into the city. Going forward, again, we're just kind of projecting a little bit less than 2% growth going forward as inflation comes down.
That's an important number to keep in the back of our minds, isn't it? For growth. Okay. Thank you.
There's another trend on the water connection fees. So you can see going back to 1819, 1920, you had some large development. 1819 is related to the Walmart. 1920, I believe, is related to a hotel. And then now, since then, it's just been kind of steady in the $60,000 range or so. So again, going forward, that 61,410, that's based on about 30 units per year of development.
That's either households or businesses,
It's equivalent, so
Okay.
one house is one unit. If you were going to build a hotel or Walmart, it's many units.
Okay.
And that's calculated out.
Moving on to the expenditures, with about 3.1 million in expenditures in the water fund. Operating expenditures just under half at 47%, personnel almost half at 48%, and then capital purchases at just 5% in 23-24. If you look at this line graph, you can see the personnel increases have been increasing each year, so that's a function of personnel-related costs going up. There was also an additional water operator added in 22-23, and then there's another water operator projected to be added in 25-26. And then also just want to highlight, you see that large spike in that light blue trend there under capital projects. So in 22-23, we spent nearly 1.4 million on the Denison mainline replacement as well as the Cherry Lane replacement. So originally the Denison mainline was projected for 23-24, but you authorized that we moved it up in 22-23, and that was completed. So that's why you see kind of the large spike in 22-23 there.
Why would the red line spike?
Operating expenses?
Did we use in-house?
Well, we spent a lot of time repairing the Denison water line
Okay.
breaks. Every time it broke, it was all hands on deck, and so there's some costs associated with that, and contractors and different things. So once we repaired it, you see the operating coming back down.
It went back down, okay. Thank you.
This is the one above Penn.
This is the water line on Denison from Tehachapi High School going south towards High Line. And then a second one along Cherry Lane from Tucker going east to the Cherry Lane Estates. There were two main water lines that were replaced.
And then just to kind of highlight some of the larger expenses in the water operating fund. So the 30,000 planned for meter replacements, 100,000 for preventative maintenance to Denison well, and then 45,000 for leased water rights, and you've got some debt payments for vehicle and backhoes.
Question, I thought we owned our water rights, where we spending the 45 for east.
We own the majority of our water rights, but we do have leased water rights.
Is this from, right?
And maybe those leases were probably signed before you came onto the council. So we have multi-year water right leases with different individuals or corporations. Yeah. With the first right of refusal to purchase.
So we'll look at the overall budget numbers for the water operating fund. And so first, we'll look at the operating fund, and then we'll look at the fee funds. But again, similar to the general fund, this is showing actuals mid-year and then 5 years, with the 23-24 year highlighted in yellow. So you can see we do show deficits going forward, starting with 75,000 in 23-24 all the way to 264,000 in 27-28. But if you just look up a couple lines above that under expenditures, and you see the capital purchase. So we've got significant capital being invested, into the infrastructure for water. If you took out those capital, okay, those deficits wouldn't be as bad. But another big reason that we're projecting these future deficits, again, is because that revenue has come down. We brought down kind of our base revenue right now based on this wet winter. We'll continue to monitor and see if our usage goes up to kind of normal levels of what we've seen in the last few years. But another thing that we have budgeted within the water operating fund is a rate study. So we're going to take a look at have a rate study done, kind of assess our rate structure and see if any changes need to be made going forward. So that should address some of the deficits that we're seeing.
What are some of the expenses you're looking at on that line for capital expenditure purchases and that? We go from 175,000 to 855,000. What are we looking at?
So out of that 855, we've got in 25-26 Snyder transmission line for the Snyder Mojave wells. That was budgeted estimated about 750,000.
And potentially new water wells. So I'll remind the council, the Snyder well, which is on the corner of Snyder and the entrance or exit to the swimming pool area, that well is not in we own it, but it's not put into our production. We sell that water to Tehachapi County Water District because they don't have a well on this end of the valley. And so it goes directly into their system. Some of that water is used to irrigate some of the grass or the turf for the school district. We'd like to put that connect it to our system. So designs, infrastructure, the piping would have to be installed. So that's a large undertaking. And then potentially drilling a new well. We want to make sure that we're years ahead of the demand, should the demand materialize.
Can I open the can of worms? Explain to me why we don't receive all the water that we should from Cummings Valley. Yet we're turned around, we're going to sell the water. I don't understand.
Well, that's a really good question.
I'm sorry if I'm not.
No, absolutely. So it's very complicated. We sell the water to them because they need it. We don't have a need for it at this point. So it's the right thing to do. Tehachapi Cummings does, in fact, sell us some water from time to time, year over year. Typically not what we ask for, and that's a moving target. That's one of the reasons why we want to put this well into service. One of many reasons. We need to control our own destiny, and we're all happy.
I just find it difficult to understand why we're allocated X amount of.
So there are two water, remember I'll remind you, there are two sources of water for the basin. One is adjudicated water rights, water that's underneath us that somebody owns. We own a lot of that water. Golden Hills owns water, Lehigh owns water. Tehachapi Cummings sells state water project water. So there are two different conversations, two different sources of water.
We're allocated X amount, we're not getting it, but we're paying the full price.
Correct, that's with the property tax allocations, yes. On your property tax bill, it does have Tehachapi Cummings County Water District ad valorem tax.
Sorry.
We're working on it.
That just bothers me that's in the realm. Why don't we send them a bill for what they don't pay? It's like going to me, as with docs, it's like going to Walmart and I take my groceries and that up to the counter and I pay the full price, yet Mr. Water person comes along and says, well, you can't have that, you can only have 75%. That's not right. I can leave now.
No, I mean, you're asking all the right questions, honestly. We've been working on this for 2+ years, 3 years.
So the water we sell from the Snyder well, is that at a different revenue rate than we would?
To say that we sell them water is not technically correct.
The transfer?
We don't sell them water. They use our well to pump their own water into their system. They pay us for the the operating costs for that
Okay.
well. So we don't really sell them water.
All right.
We don't sell Tehachapi Cummings
It's not
water.
a per gallon
It's their own
fee.
water that they're pumping out of the ground into
Okay.
their system. They're just using our well to do that.
All right.
We only sell potable water, but they need our well for their operations on the east end of the valley.
Periodically, they use it, yeah.
So it's plumbed into their system,
Yes.
correct?
Yes, that's
And can be
correct.
used for landscape and irrigation?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and then in turn, actually, we purchase some of that water from them for irrigation purposes, the high school.
Sure.
Warrior Park, there's a few areas that use that water, so we actually purchase that water from them.
So we have plumbing for like Warrior Park,
Yes,
for that landscape and irrigation
Warrior
system?
Park is Tehachapi Cummings County water. It's not potable water that's used to irrigate that grass.
That's a good thing.
And that's what we want. Moving forward, that's the right thing to do.
We want groundwater for humans and
Correct.
Tehachapi Cummings other water for grass and irrigation.
right.
That's the goal.
It's complicated.
It's very complicated.
Wouldn't that be a strangle on them to say, hey, you're not playing right with us, we'll cut you off? Well, you know, I mean, I'm young in this, but I just have a real tough time swallowing that pill, that we are billed X amount of dollars for the part we're supposed to get, and we don't get all of it.
You're right. Nobody's debating that. Yeah.
That's why
we have a-
attorneys make lots of money.
We have limited ability to affect that. Okay.
Thank you.
Good questions over there.
Maybe I could help one or two little words. Keith, part of the reason the state water project limits the percentage, the allocation, is in drought years, there simply isn't the water to sell. But the contracts that were put in place to support the system in 1960, whatever, continue. Plus, part of that water that we might have bought has been diverted due to environmental concerns, blah, blah, blah. Would that help at all?
No.
I'm sorry.
Right.
I don't.
You've been doing your homework.
I'm a person, I don't quit till I really understand, and I do not understand why you bill for X amount of, you sell newspapers, okay? You should send me a bill for X amount of dollars, and I say, I don't want to pay you that much, I want to only pay you 75%.
Well, actually, when people went to the polls in 1960, whatever, we basically put the lands of this district on the hook. Is that, wouldn't you say that's true? I mean, it's something we don't necessarily understand, but we did. But something that's really important to remember is that when we did that, we have no water in the ground. And
That's a good point, actually.
and had we not, I mean, there's lots of nuances of this that people could argue about, but had we not done that, and had we not done all the things that were required to allow us to do that, we would not have been able to refill this basin and get us to the point that we can manage pretty well.
So
Something like
the pioneers, you know, the Jake Jacobson and all the others, they were visionaries creating Tehachapi Cummings County Water District. They truly were. And it's a good thing. Even today, it's a really good thing. But from time to time, you know, policies, procedures, they need to be updated. So that's where we feel we are. But back to our budget?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. That's all right.
All right, so now we'll look at the development fee portion of the water funds. So again, the main revenues are the water connection fees, water right mitigation fees. Those are each based on 30 units going forward each year. And then you'll see that operating number of $233,000 in 23-24. So that's the last year of some note payments for water right purchases that were done. They were 3-year payments. So after that, you'll see this development fee fund going from the negative cash to positive in cash of $466,000 in the fifth year, 27-28. When you combine the two, the fee funds as well as operating funds, this is the overall summary for the water fund. So you can see the deficits not quite as large there, again, mainly due to the large capital purchases being invested in the infrastructure. But again, rate study will be needed in this water fund to address the deficits that we see there. But when you look at the beginning cash, it is dwindling down. Our ending cash is just at $22,000 in 27-28. And again, supporting the need to do a rate study and see if we need to make any rate adjustments.
And enterprise funds, or this company, if you will, they're designed to be net at the end of the year. You don't want to charge more than it costs to deliver that service, in this case water, or you don't want to charge less. That's hence the need for the rate study. Let us make sure, we're going to be doing this in the next 12 to 24 months, let us make certain, because things are changing rapidly in the water world. People are using a lot less water. But the city's growing too, and so there are lots of variables when it comes to water. It's a moving target. Water and wastewater are two of probably the biggest moving targets that we have in our portfolio.
All right, next enterprise fund is the sewer fund. So our revenue for our sewer charges is just under $2.6 million. That's a 6% increase. This, similarly to water, we adjust this by CPI. In this particular case, sewer uses the November CPI year over year. So that's a 6% adjustment to the rates factored in. And then the connection fees, again, we're basing it on 30 units, conservative number, and so there is a decrease there compared to prior year revenue number. Overall revenues for the sewer fund is just over $3 million. You can see 86% of that comes from the sewer service charges. The bond/loan proceeds, those are actually what we call loan repayments. The sewer fund has a loan existing for the police department facility. And so the facility fee funds pays back for whatever facility fees it receives each year, pays back to the sewer fund. 10-year revenue trend for the sewer service charges. Again, these go up by the CPI for November, year over year each year. So we've seen a couple years now of 6% increases. Going forward, we're just projecting 1% increase. Similarly to the connection fee trend that we saw in the water fund, we see the high numbers in 18-19 related to the Walmart development, and then 19-20 for a new hotel. Going forward, we're at 173,000, again, based on just 30 units. On the expenditure side, just under $3.2 million, broken that up to 39% operating expenditures, 34% personnel costs, and then 27% in capital. And some of the highlights of those capital expenditures, $150,000 for the headwork screw and bypass replacements, another $150,000 for the clarifier overhaul. We have a new reclamation area at $400,000, SCADA upgrade, biosolids handling study, and then the bottom three are just kind of debt service payments for the street sweeper, vehicle leases, and airport land lease.
Are we purchasing land for that reclamation area?
It is in a future budget for potentially moving our reclamation off of the airport onto property, but it's somewhat tied to GSP or IPR, which we have an MOU signed with Tehachapi.
You said three different abbreviations right there.
Sorry.
It's all tied to SPR, OPR, ISG.
24/7, I think about this. So GSP,
Groundwater Sustainability Plan.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
NPR, which is the same thing, indirect potable reuse.
Okay.
One and the same, two different acronyms. So what we'd like to do is move the reclamation off of the airport, opening the airport out for future development, whether it be event center, aviation, other things that are allowable in the FAA. So we've signed an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with Tehachapi County Water District to work on that. But as you know, several weeks after that was signed, they tried to
They tried to change the formula for repayment on our investment.
Yeah, and so we are working that issue also.
Okay.
So the land lease is what the wastewater company pays the airport for the use of that land.
Airport company.
Correct. We had two different companies. We hired an appraiser several years ago, and that property was appraised for that use, ag use, and that's what it was appraised at. Annually.
Here we have the budget summary for the sewer operating fund. So you see the sewer service charges range from about 2.5 million all the way up to 2.69 million. We do see deficits in 4 out of the 5 years, but again, if you look at the capital purchase line under expenditures, you see some significant expenditures in investment in infrastructure to sewer. If you were to take out those capital items, then you would see surpluses each year.
Are we borrowing from another account for those expenditures? Or from the general fund, or we're?
We are not. You can see if you look at the beginning cash towards the bottom, the sewer fund does have healthy fund balance on hand.
Okay.
To be able to afford these, the capital purchases.
But we have to show it as a deficit for the year that we use it.
For the particular year.
All right.
But there's fund balance on hand to.
Correct.
For instance, next year, Don is going to be rebuilding the clarifier, which is one of the last steps within the process of treating wastewater. So I think just in a couple of weeks, Don, they're going to mobilize. That costs a lot of money because we're going to drain the clarifier. They're going to be for several weeks, upgrading all kinds of gears and different things. And that hasn't been done in years. And you want your wastewater treatment plant to operate well.
That is one thing you want to work well, along with your other wells. Yes. Are we going tertiary anytime in the future? Tertiary treatment?
I want to say probably not because of the GSP program, which will incorporate that term, which is a loose term these days. But yeah, at some point. We will if we need to, but that's not, the part of the plan is GSP.
That we let the Mother Earth filter it for
Like
us.
she does now.
Very good. I like that even better.
Here's the budget summary for the sewer development fee funds. So you have the sewer connection fees, those loan repayments, and then you have interest income based on the fund balance that make up the revenues. So you see that beginning cash here is growing because there's an ongoing surplus as long as we keep collecting these connection fees at their current levels.
But that's so we can make capital improvements down the line.
Right, and I'm just going to mention, Councilmember Smith, you were on the council at the time when the city was in a big panic because we didn't have the money and we were required, forced by the state to make some improvements.
Oh, yeah.
We had to go get big loans and blow big bonds to make that work. In this case, we have cash to at least, down payment on things because wastewater treatment plants are probably the most expensive single item that we operate in the city of Tehachapi. When you need to upgrade a wastewater treatment plant, you're going to spend 20, 30, 40 million and above. Yeah.
Oh, the growth is increases as well.
Interesting though, because people are using less water is going into the plant, so that's a different challenge actually between solids and liquids. So Jay has that all figured out.
You want to comment or no?
No, thank you. We're working on it.
Next, we have a combined summary of the development fees and the operating funds, so the sewer fund all together. So you have the sewer service charges, the connection fees, and then all the operating expenditures as well as those large capital expenditures planned. So with that, you have some years of deficits, you have some years of surpluses, but again, the sewer fund does have healthy fund balance on hand to support these large capital expenditures. The next enterprise fund is the airport fund. So as we discussed earlier, both revenues and expenditures are over $8 million. They're traditionally under $2 million, but you have on the expenditure side, the $6.8 million taxi relocation project and drainage improvements. On the revenue side, then you have $6.1 million in an FAA grant, $300,000 from a state grant, and then the general fund grant match of $373,000. So if you were to take out all that, there's an additional general fund transfer or subsidy payment to support the airport operations of $155,000.
I have a question. How long does it take for the state to give us the grant money that we're supposed to get, and then we go ahead and spend the money out of our general fund? So what's the
Reimburse us.
Pardon me?
Reimburse us.
Yeah, reimburse us, yes. What's the time frame on something like that?
Well,
Here,
I haven't gone
I
through it sincerely,
I can
but
speak
actually-
specifically to the FAA.
Okay.
Shockingly, it's pretty fast on there, and when our finance department, after we pay, once we actually submit stuff to what's called the Delphi, it's typically within a few days to, at most a few weeks.
Okay.
And that's on the FAA side.
on the other end of the scale, we're still waiting for our final payment for the tree grant program a year and a half ago. Once again, it's good to have money in the bank.
Yeah.
To pay the bills, because the contractor, we are obligated to pay the contractor once they submit. And it's not one big payment. We don't receive, we don't pay the contractor all at once. We pay with progression. And same thing, we submit those with our documents to the authorities, the grant, the FAA or others, and they reimburse us for that. And there's always a withholding of 10% to the very end. That's what our, notice of completions are all about from time to time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. It's a process. Jay has a team of people that work on this. It costs a lot of money to receive money and to process those projects.
Here we have a pie chart of the operating revenue to the airport, so minus the large FAA grants. So you can see fuel sales make up about 28% of the revenue, property lease 10%, you have hangar fees of $195,000, and then you have that big pie component to the left, and that's kind of just the match coming into the airport operating fund, as well as that $155,000 subsidy transfer from the general fund. On the operating expense side, 1.3 million.
Michael had a question.
Yeah. Do airports ever make money? Honestly, I just,
I think
since
they
I've been
could
on the
make money if
council.
there are commercial operations.
Okay.
That's really not the single difference, but a big difference. General aviation airports typically don't, if you break even, you're doing good.
In business, that just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't.
Yeah, it just,
But in the bigger context, like from 10,000 feet, an airport within your city, it does add value, public safety value. And there's some indirect, there's businesses that are operating on the airport. And so they pay a nominal fee for the rent of the hangar or the building, but they're employing people. So, there have been studies done, over and over and over again, but, breaking even would be a big, big win.
okay. I know it's always been something we've talked about every year since I've been on the council.
Some cities, some operators charge landing fees, there's all kinds of ways, but, at this point, I feel like we've done everything that we can.
Elevation fees. We should charge them when they fly too low over the city.
Yeah.
We're not at 1,000 feet.
Well, and we have the best airport manager in the county, so just saying.
My next project, we'll leave it for now.
We should do housing on the north side. Airport, houses.
Hangars and,
Costco?
Don't worry.
That's the next meeting.
No. We've already, I mean.
We got plenty of airplanes flying around.
With the FAA years ago, that's not viable, but I think opening up the north side would be a good thing. If we could, you know, find a place for our wastewater operations and opening the north side, there's potentially some opportunities. But those opportunities, you need cash. You're gonna have to invest money in the infrastructure, you know, gates, roads, taxiways, those sorts of things.
Okay, actually,
So,
Well, if you're already in the red, let's not go further.
no. All right, sorry, Bob.
So on the operating expenditure side, 1.3 million. Operating expenses make up 48% of that, personnel 27%, and then fuel purchases another 25%.
how many people work at the airport?
So you have myself, we have an inspector, and then a lot of the public works time, some of engineering's time, it's all allocated to the airport.
the reason I looked at Ashley, I thought you were talking about private businesses, or did she answer your question?
No, I didn't know if it was city personnel
They're all
or
city.
Yeah.
whether,
Yeah.
well, we can do, no.
We don't have any one person that's full-time at the airport. Ashley is the airport manager, but she does many other things. Dawn supplies the public works personnel for the maintenance. We do have one full-time part-time guy, that's all he does. Works 2 or 3 hours a day. We do not have one single person.
How much of your, are you allocated in a percentage?
I think 40?
I want to say about 40%.
Yeah. With other duties, everything else you do, about 40% is allocated to them.
All depends on the week.
Yep. Sometimes it's 100. All right.
And you have small allocations from finance too, because of the
Everybody
accounting, paying
has to be
bills.
included.
Same thing with public works, everyone
Yeah.
touches it.
I think we could work on the fuel purchases.
We have the lowest fuel prices.
I'm just digging, Michael.
I don't do aviation
No,
fuel.
our side does not supply aviation fuel.
No,
I thought I had to.
no.
We do sell a lot of jet fuel, surprisingly. Kern County Fire Department with the helicopters. And then we have, private jets that go in and out. Yeah.
I just thought I had my.
And so we charge for the cost of the fuel and the overhead and, the tanks cost, the electricity, the personnel, those sorts of things, on top of that.
Bring it up.
People had what I'm telling you.
Here's the budget summary for the operating fund within the airport. So it lists the various revenue categories as well as the expenditure categories. And then you can see in the surplus deficit area, just a small 297 deficit. And the only reason that's there is because we have on hand $297 to offset that. The future years all show zero, again, because we try to zero out the operating fund. And so because there's a transfer in from the general fund, it just zeroes out this operating surplus or deficit. Next is the airport project fund. So these are the large capital projects planned for the airport fund. So again, in 23-24, that's the taxiway relocation project at just under 6.8 million. In 24-25 and 26-27, those projects are related to the fuel facility upgrade. And then in 27-28, 2.4 million for a runway rehab project. Again, on the revenue side, you can see those are all calculated in. So the FAA grant, it's 90% of the capital project expenditure total. State grant is 4.5%. And then the general fund transfer in or matching fund is at 0.5%. And again, it zeroes out any surplus or deficit going forward. And then finally, you have the overall summary for both the operating and the capital projects. So it has all the revenues, all the expenditures, including those capital. And again, the surplus and deficit in the 4 future years after the small deficit with funds on hand, we zero that out mainly because of the contributions coming from the general fund.
Can you go back a sheet?
Sure.
So if we're subsidizing at about 140, 150,000 a year, why do we have an ending cash and AR continuous at about 67,281?
The 67,000, I think it's just an accounting entry between the operating fund and the project fund. Just the way
Okay.
we have the transfer coming in, but they net to zero.
Right.
Look at it completely.
Okay.
All right, next enterprise fund is our refuse fund or our trash fund. So again, our expenditures are mostly with our contract with Waste Management. Similarly to the airport, we do allocate some staff time. So you see there's a personnel expenditure category. So various employees have little pieces of them that are allocated to this fund. The revenues we collect on behalf of Waste Management. We do collect 10% that we withhold for our admin fees. That's to kind of cover the city's administration of this. And I do want to point out, you'll see in all 5 years a growing deficit of about 35,000 all the way up to 55,000. And really what that is the CPI adjustment that Waste Management is applying to their rates have been less than what the city is providing as our CPI adjustment. And so there's a little bit of an imbalance there. That 10% admin cost is not fully covering the city's administrative expenses. So we do have budgeted within this fund a rate study. Again, we need to take a look at our rates and work with Waste Management to address this deficit going forward. So we do have enough available cash right now to support the deficit next year, but then beyond that, we're looking at negative cash.
And so the refuse world uses a different CPI out of a different month. And so we're 180 degrees apart. So this is a particularly a growing problem that we've identified that we'll be addressing. Who would have ever thought? They have their own CPI.
That's very interesting.
Nationwide.
Oh, it's a nationwide.
Yeah, this is not just Waste Management for Tehachapi.
Because we use ours, which is some CPI associated with Riverside and
Right, and
Southern
they have different
California.
zones, regions, of course.
Yeah.
But it's a whole different way of calculating the CPI.
Okay, so I am glad we're going to have a talk with them.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have a growing list of things that we are negotiating with them.
However, I have to say their facilities and grounds out there
Beautiful.
much improved, so really
Big
good.
thank you to WM.
Yes, they're a good corporate partner at the moment. So.
I drove by there today, they're landscaping out on Denison,
Yeah, they're going at it.
which I was looking at Denison Road, and it's pretty bad in that area. I know it's on Don's list, but they're stepping it up big time with their landscaping and painting, and it really looks presentable. It's a
That's good.
professional facility now.
As it should.
So we thank
Yes.
them for that.
Next is the transit fund. So this is the funding of budget for our dial ride service that the city provides. So you can see the various revenue sources there. The fares, passenger fares only provide about $4,000 to $4,500 in revenue each year. We have been receiving a little bit of COVID grant-related funding that can be used to offset the city's fare box ratio requirement. But this is primarily funded from that line that says Transit Article 4. So that's from the state local transportation funds or LTF funds. So again, we allocate some of the personnel at the city there but the majority of the operating expenses are with the contract with current regional transit. And then you can see there the surplus deficit going forward, we zero that out. Again, we're estimating that whatever expenditures we have, we will claim from the LTF funds and be made whole.
This is a state requirement. We're required to provide the service.
Yes, and also to point out, by providing this and using those LTF funds, any remaining LTF funds then we're allowed to allocate towards our streets and roads funds. And that's when we can do a lot of these street rehab projects with those monies.
I think this is giving our handicapped people some mobility that they really wouldn't have. There's a gentleman where I live that uses it quite a bit. It may cost us a little bit, but that's what we do.
Yeah, seniors, handicap, youth, others, it is well used. We wish it could be more, but it's certainly there. You can make an appointment, or you can call, ring them up and see if they're available, but people do use it.
Just as a service to those people.
I went to a meeting and the supervisor's assistant, Laura Lynn White, was there talking about the upgrade to the transit center in Mojave. It's just set still now for a year. It's kind of a, they call it it's a wall of shame. It just looks terrible, and that's supposed to be this big thing that they get our people from here to Lancaster and everything in the center, and I guess the contractor just kind of just left high and dry, so they're trying to get something else going on that.
Yeah, it's been languishing for several years.
Yeah, not
Several
just
years.
one.
Yeah, but it's just, I haven't seen anybody working there for a long time, so.
Yeah.
uh,
Our transit center on the other end of the scale, though, on Tehachapi Boulevard, is well used.
Yeah.
For park and ride, for downtown parking, Amtrak, Orange Belt Greyhound, Dial-A-Ride, regional transit, everybody uses that, so we're proud of that facility, that's for sure.
Next slide is a summary of our remaining funds. So we call these special revenue funds. And so this is like the SB1 for road maintenance, gas tax, streets and roads, and then followed by various fee funds. So kind of the left to middle under project costs, that's just showing the estimated expenditures over the 5 years. And then to the right, you have the revenue budget, where we're just summarizing the total revenues for a 5-year period for all of these funds. So some of these, there's some grant revenue related to these. A lot of them are road maintenance related funds that we receive.
Not everything over the next 5 years is on that list, obviously. We're very successful writing grants, obtaining grants, and delivering the projects. Sometimes those come along rather quickly. Sometimes we have, several months to plan for them, but I don't want you to think that those 5 years listed are in total what we plan on doing over the next 5 years, because we'll certainly have lots more projects than what you see there.
Can I make a comment on the Denison bicycle? Pathway improvement. I'm a little bit concerned there because if I understand, you're going to do most of the sidewalk on the east side. If you're looking north, it's on the east side, which is on the other side of the school, other side of the road from the school. I don't see teenagers walking across the street to walk down that street. The other concern I have is the mobile home park there, where it narrows down to a very scary walking area. And then that concerns me. I don't see them going over there to come back over here to, although their houses are on the, if they're walking that way, are on the left side.
So you're right, all the above. The mobile home park on the west side does protrude out. It would take, buying that property and relocating those mobile homes That's not part of this grant. The state agreed with us that at least we could provide a safe pathway on the east side. The west side would be the next step. Much larger project. We would have to displace and relocate, residents. But it's something that's certainly on our radar. And we believe, like you do, that the west side, it would be more utilized than the east side. But the east side is a good start because nothing is there now on the east or west.
There
And
is
the grant that we received would not pay for the relocation of those residents. We'd have to look for other monies to do that.
Okay. But it seems to me that on the west side of Denison going up would be the one that you would attack first till you get to the trailer park, and we all know that's a problem.
But we don't want to build a sidewalk to nowhere.
Well, but you're,
And then
if you
encouraging
walk,
people to go into the street. So that's a project that we're working on, but it's going to be some time before we get to that point. Mobile home parks are highly regulated by the state of
yeah,
California.
oh, yes.
They're an independent nation.
Understand that one?
Yeah.
Just my thought.
Yep, good thoughts.
So the next set of funds are the funds we've created to track our various capital projects. So as Greg said, you can see in 23-24, a lot of those we highlighted earlier. There's a lot of capital projects to be done. We don't show anything in the future years beyond that because we do create funds for each specific capital project. So like Greg said, there will likely be future capital projects that as they come about, we'll create funds, add the budget, and then start tracking them. We do have Fund 364 there, the last one for future street rehab. That's part of the street rehab plan. It's a 10-year plan where we're trying to rehabilitate various roads within the city. So we've just projected $350,000 a year. That's funded from mostly SB1 funds, gas tax, and streets and roads.
And alleys.
I was waiting. I was just sitting and waiting.
This is a summary of all of the landscape and lighting district funds. So you have the various developments. We do track them separately each has its own fund. So we've estimated the property tax revenues based on their authorized levies. And then we continue to track our personnel-related expenditures as well as the landscape contract and administrative charges. So you can see in a lot of these, even though the bottom line shows small surpluses or deficits, that's because under the revenue, there's a general fund subsidy line item, and there's some significant subsidy amounts coming from the general fund. And then finally, we have our drainage basin assessment districts. So these are the two existing ones. Same thing as the LLDs. We project the property taxes based on the authorized levies, and then we have our estimated expenditures. So for both of these, we do show currently surpluses in those funds. And that is the end of the presentation. So in closing, I do want to say that this is a balanced budget. I want to thank the departments for completing their budgets, submitting them in a timely fashion. Also want to thank the finance department and staff for compiling all the numbers, putting this together, helping me with the presentation. And we continue to budget conservatively, both our revenues and expenditures. That's best practice to do so. In some of our enterprise funds, we saw in sewer, water, refuse, we are budgeting for rate studies so that we can look at the fiscal sustainability of those funds. Also, want to highlight again that Measure S, it's providing the general fund the financial stability that we were seeking. It's also allowing the city to maintain its infrastructure, fire protection, and public safety. And then general fund, as you saw, we have surpluses going on for 5 years. We have healthy reserves. So we're in great shape in the general fund to provide for any emergencies or capital projects as needed going forward in the future. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
I'd like to thank you for all your time and effort and for the graphs that we can see and understand.
You're welcome.
Comment? If you're,
Yeah, go ahead.
just,
Go ahead, Phil.
I've seen a couple of these over the years. and Really good, concise, easy to read, easy to follow, because we've seen them 4 times as thick as this. Nothing bad with that, but this is a real good 5-year plan, so easy to digest. Thank you very much. And tell your award-winning crew, thank you. All the departments. It's everyone in the city.
I mean, I don't want anyone to think this is the first time you guys have seen, you don't see a budget once a year. You actually come in and we talk about numbers and the data, so this is nothing new for you. We've talked about all these different things, throughout the year, so appreciate your involvement in this process.
Well, with the 5-year plan, at least you're not reacting every year to some crisis. And if we do have a crisis, we're set aside and we're ready for it, so. Overall health is excellent, I would say.
Yes.
All right.
Mrs. Hogan, do you have any?
No, he always does it. We have done in the last 2 budgets I've witnessed, they've been really outstanding. And they've won awards, so it shows.
Susan? Yeah, I just, when I got into city politics, I said that's the #1 thing you need to be aware of, spending people's money. I've talked to Mr. Garrett about it, and I'm a hot admit about it. I think this is a balanced budget, which is always good for our cities, and that's what we strive to do at our homes. So I think we need to do this to our city to let our residents know that we've worked on this hard. You guys have worked on it very good, and I appreciate it. And I appreciate all your hard work and the staff, all their staff on this. Thank them for their service to this also.
I'd like to thank every employee from top to bottom are engaged with this budget. And you talk budget regularly about different things. So every single employee understands at some level how much the document means to the health of the city.
There's nothing else. We'll move on to...
I'm needing a motion.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Say we do.
Adopt a resolution approving the City of Tehachapi budget for fiscal year 23-24. Do I need to read the whole thing? Or?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. The resolution approving the City of Tehachapi budget for fiscal year 23-24. The primary budget for fiscal years 24-25, 25-26, 26-27, and 27-28. Need to adopt a resolution establishing a salary plan for each position, classification, and city service, and repealing the resolution number 36-22.
So moved.
I'll second.
Roll call vote, please.
Can we have some discussion?
I thought we just did
Yeah.
before we did that, but go ahead.
Are we going to go through the agenda? The rest of the agenda?
We are right
Okay,
now.
I just wanted to make sure. It means scary.
All right. Do we, number 1, we need to take a roll call vote on item 1, please?
Councilmember Sakowitz?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Wiggins?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Hogancourt?
Yes.
Mayor Davies?
Yes.
It was a 5-0 vote to adopt the resolutions as presented.
Thank you. Okay, item 2, appropriation limit for fiscal year 23-24. Adopt a resolution establishing an appropriation limit pursuant to Article X113, I don't know what that number is.
13.
13, thank you. B, of the California Constitution and repealing resolution number 37-22. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Sakowitz?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Wiggins?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Hogancourt?
Yes.
Mayor Davies?
Yes.
It was a 5-0 vote to adopt the resolution as presented.
Thank you. That's it for the budget hearing. Council member reports. Phil, do you have anything?
Not tonight.
Hoagie?
Nothing.
Susan? Mr. Sackwitz?
I do.
Okay.
I would like to announce that this will be my last official meeting as a councilman, and that we have sold our home and bought a new home in St. George, Utah, if I can remember where I'm going. And I would like to thank you all for your putting up with me, because I know some of the questions I ask are maybe not what you want to hear, but I think we need to hear. And for the way I've been treated as a councilman and as a person going through the process of being a councilman. Like I said before, it's something I've always wanted to do. Damn it, I gotta go do something else. But I thank you for that. And hopefully, as you can tell, Tehachapi's in my heart. My family started here. As I've told you before, they were all raised here. Sorry, I'm a crier. But it holds a deep place in my heart. And I will always love Tehachapi. It'll always be part of my life. So and there's still some things that I need to see get done. So, thank you.
Well, Keith, as all the members of our church that have moved to Utah because they think that's the right thing to do, you'll be back.
Well, I'm a swallow. I've been here before.
Yeah, so that's always my history. We've had people move in and out of Utah, so I always ask, when do I have to go? So I'm holding out right now. So, but I'd like to personally thank Keith for his service to the city. Many years. I think I gave this speech last council meeting, but what he's done for the train depot and what he's done in the city itself, I appreciate all his service to our city and to our community, and you will be missed, Keith.
I will miss you.
Thank you.
Ladies, if I may.
Yes, sir.
First and foremost, I echo what you just said. Thank you, Mr. Sackwitz, for everything that you've done for the city and this community. The list is too long to list. If it's okay with the city council, I would like to, because time is of the essence. We have two options. One is to advertise and appoint through the duration of Mr. Sackwitz's term, which is November 2024, or hold a special election. Of course, appointment would be my preference, not making the decision, of course, because of the dollars that it would take to hold a special election and the time also. So what I'd like to do is, if it's okay with the 5 members, put it on the next city council agenda so that we can officially have that conversation and get the decision made so that we can start advertising whichever route you two decide to go with. We will be holding another special city council meeting this Thursday at 3 o'clock in this room also. The reason for that is our colleagues in Sacramento and Washington, D.C. have left a lot of their paperwork to the last minute and need to ask permission to move forward with the FAA grant for the airport and the Valley Boulevard reconstruct. Both of those are very, very time sensitive, very, very time sensitive. And so we're pushing ourselves very hard, and we're just receiving the final authorizations and documents to be able to put that through. And because of the July 4th holiday and other things, we're going to be holding a special city council meeting in this room again at 3 p.m. this Thursday to talk about those items. And so I'd like to put this on the agenda if there's no objection.
I have no objection.
Okay.
Do I need to vote or anything?
No, just as long as there's no objection, I think we'll be just fine. I talked to Mr. Schroeder about it, so we're fine.
Okay. Then we'll be here Thursday at 3 p.m.
Thank you.
All right. If nothing else, is there?
Richard?
Okay, we're adjourned.